My name is Luna Lana. I am 32, and this past Thanksgiving in San Antonio changed my family forever. Growing up, my parents took my sister on lavish vacations, while I was left at the neighbor's house, erased from family memories. Yet last week, my mother had the nerve to demand I host and pay for their 40th anniversary dinner for 20 relatives. She smirked and said it is the least you can do to finally be useful. I smiled and agreed, setting a breathtaking dining room with crystal glasses and fine china. But when they arrived at 7 p.m., the house was dead silent. My chair was physically removed from the room, and a single note sat on the empty mahogany table. Before I reveal exactly what that note said to make my father collapse, welcome back to my channel. Drop a comment telling me your age and what city you are watching from, and be sure to subscribe. I map supply chains for a logistics firm in San Antonio. My daily routine involves tracing the flow of goods and identifying bottlenecks. It took me a decade of auditing corporate accounts to realize my parents operated on the exact same model. They treated my income as their personal distribution center. Barbara, my mother, never viewed this dynamic as a flaw. In her mind, the strong naturally subsidize the weak. The primary beneficiary of this arrangement was my 30-year-old sister, Chloe. While I spent my early 20s securing a degree and climbing corporate ladders, Chloe pursued an abstract art career. Her gallery exhibitions rarely sold a piece, yet her rent remained paid and her studio stayed funded. I used to wonder where the capital originated. Then, 3 months ago, I made the mistake of leaving my ledger unguarded. We sat on the patio of a local bistro. Condensation dripped down my glass of iced tea. Barbara slid a manila folder across the wrought iron table. Inside were the venue and catering agreements for her 40th wedding anniversary. She did not ask me to review them. She handed me a pen. Chloe is stretched thin right now, Barbara said, tapping a manicured nail against the signature line. She is conceptualizing a new exhibit. The venue requires a $5,000 deposit today to hold the date, and your father and I need a guarantor just on paper for the rest. We will transfer the deposit back to you on Friday. I hesitated. The total, printed at the bottom of the page, hovered near $20,000. As an auditor, red flags immediately deployed in my mind. A guarantor is never just on paper. I opened my mouth to suggest scaling down the guest list. Barbara did not miss a beat. She adjusted her sunglasses, her tone casual and conversational. We paid for your braces, Luna. We covered your tutoring when you struggled in middle school math. It is about balancing the scales. That was her currency. Transactional guilt, measured out over decades. I looked at the contract. A lingering irrational reflex pushed my hand forward. The desire to finally be recognized as a vital component of this family made me pick up the pen. I signed my name. I ignored the tension settling at the base of my neck. I assumed guarantor meant a safety net. I forgot that in this family, a safety net is just a hammock for someone else to rest in. The trap snapped shut a week before Thanksgiving. I stopped by my parents' house to drop off some centerpieces. Richard, my father, sat in his armchair, focused intensely on a muted television screen. Barbara stood in the kitchen. Next to her on the granite island sat a pristine robin egg blue box. A $3,000 luxury espresso machine, explicitly requested by Chloe for her art studio. Barbara was casually unpacking the heavy chrome portafilter when she delivered the update. The caterer needs the final balance by Friday, she noted, admiring the shiny metal. 15,000. I told them to run the card you put on file. The ceramic centerpiece clinked against the counter. I stared at the espresso machine. My card was for the deposit, Mom. You said you and Dad were handling the balance. How can you buy that for Chloe right now? Richard kept his gaze glued to the television. Do not make this hard on your mother, he murmured. Barbara finally turned. She offered a tight practice smile. Chloe needs this for her creative process. Paying for the dinner is the least you can do to finally be useful, Luna. Consider it your gift to us. I looked at the $3,000 machine bought with my forced debt and then at my father who refused to meet my eye. They simply existed, in a state of unshakable entitlement. Debating them would be like arguing with gravity. I did not say another word. I turned around, walked out the front door, and drove back to my office. I knew exactly how to sever the supply line. The low hum of the office ventilation system provided a constant drone overhead. My fingers tapped across the mechanical keyboard, a rhythmic clatter echoing in the empty room. I stared at the logistical mapping software on my monitor. Red lines indicated blocked distribution routes. Green lines showed active pathways. I dialed the catering company. The phone rang 3 times before the manager picked up the line. Instead of a greeting, the receiver transmitted the sound of a deep sigh, followed by the loud shuffling of heavy cardstock. I communicated my objective to transfer the final billing to my father's name. The response was a sharp intake of breath. The friction of the moment hung in the air, underscored by the distant rumble of thunder outside my window. The manager made his stance clear through the tight, strained cadence of his voice. Removing my card as the primary payment method 48 hours before the event triggered an automatic hold on the food delivery. I instructed him to switch the final billing directly to my father, the primary host listed on the contract. The manager agreed to send the final payment link to my parents, but warned that no food would be unloaded from their trucks until that $15,000 balance was processed. Rain began to lash against the glass, a sharp, stinging rhythm against the window pane. I listened to the steady thud of my own heartbeat. My $5,000 deposit was locked in as a sunk cost. In supply chain analytics, you learn to identify a compromised route and amputate the connection before it drains the primary reserve. I pressed the enter key on the digital authorization form, legally severing my financial tie to the event. I absorbed the $5,000 hit. A steep price for permanent freedom. A long, shaky exhale escaped my lungs. The sound of relief mixed with the cold reality of consequence. A heavy burden lifted from my shoulders, replaced by the hollow echo of a depleted bank account. The sharp, metallic ping of a text notification pierced the quiet room. Then another ping. And a third. The screen illuminated with messages from my sister. The notifications kept chiming in a relentless, demanding tempo. Make sure the caterer brings that imported cashew cheese. My stomach cannot handle regular dairy. Oh, and tip them well. I do not want bad energy at the party. Also, set the thermostat to 72 degrees before we get there. I read the words glowing on the screen. I listened to the steady drumming of the rain and felt a brief, humorless laugh vibrate in my throat. The sound was dry and short. Chloe navigated life, expecting the road to pave itself beneath her feet. She remained oblivious to the tectonic shift occurring beneath her carefully curated existence. She believed I derived satisfaction from facilitating her comfort. The pinging finally stopped. I tossed the phone into my leather bag. The dull thump of the device hitting the bottom signaled the end of my availability. The morning of the anniversary arrived with the bitter chill of a Texas cold front. The wind howled against the eaves of my house, providing a chaotic background track to my orderly task. The mahogany dining table itself held a history of unbalanced ledgers, absorbing the sounds of countless holidays where my contributions were consumed and forgotten. I smoothed the crisp linen tablecloth over the polished grain. 20 heavy ceramic plates hit the protective placemats with a muted thud. I arranged the silverware in mathematical precision, the metallic clatter echoing in the quiet room. The clink of crystal wine glasses touching down rang out like small bells. I folded the napkins into stiff peaks and adjusted the floral centerpieces. I stepped back. The setup mirrored a professional architectural rendering. Flawless and cold. A pristine stage waiting for an audience that expected a seamless production. A floorboard groaned beneath my weight as I walked to the head of the table. I gripped the back of my own dining chair. The wooden legs scraped harshly across the hardwood floor. A loud, grinding noise that shattered the pristine quiet of the dining room. I pulled the chair backward, dragging it out of the space and into the adjacent hallway. The scrape echoed off the walls. I physically removed my presence from the equation. The void left by the missing chair spoke louder than any spoken argument. I retrieved a thick, cream-colored envelope from my bag. The heavy paper rustled between my fingers. Inside rested the final catering invoice. $15,000 of outstanding debt, printed squarely under my father's name. I placed the envelope dead center on the polished mahogany. It landed with a soft, definitive smack. I uncapped a fountain pen. The scratch of the metal nib against paper filled the empty room. A singular, focused sound. I wrote one sentence. I set the table, you handle the bill. No dramatic explanations. No emotional pleas. Just a transfer of liability recorded in ink. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed the half-hour. A deep, resonant gong echoing 6 times. 6:30 in the evening. I turned off the main chandelier. The room descended into long shadows. My boots clicked against the entryway tile. The heavy oak front door swung open, letting in a rush of freezing air. The wind roared past my ears. I stepped outside and pulled the door shut. The deadbolt clicked into place with a sharp, metallic snap. I slid into the driver's seat of my car. The engine roared to life, a steady, powerful hum vibrating through the steering wheel. Tires crunched over the gravel driveway. I drove away into the darkening street, leaving an empty stage waiting for its cast, as the rain started to fall again, masking the sound of my departure. The engine of my sedan idled with a low, steady rumble in the empty parking lot of a coffee shop 3 miles from my neighborhood. Rain hammered against the windshield. Thick, heavy drops smacking the glass in a chaotic rhythm. Thunder rolled in the distance. A deep vibration that rattled the plastic dashboard. I sat in the driver's seat, clutching a cardboard cup of black coffee. The heat seeped through the sleeve, burning my palms, just enough to keep me grounded. The digital clock on the dashboard flipped to 7 in the evening. A soft electronic chime sounded from the phone resting in my lap. The screen illuminated the dark cabin with a harsh white glow. A motion detection alert from the dining room security camera flashed across the display. I tapped the notification. The live video feed buffered for a fraction of a second before resolving into high-definition color. The audio channel hissed with the sound of the storm outside my house, followed by the sharp click of the front door lock turning. It was 6:45. The heavy oak door swung inward. My mother, father, and sister walked into the entryway alone. I watched my mother step into the frame. She moved with a confident, sweeping stride. A wide smile stretched across her face as she surveyed the crystal glasses and the folded linen napkins from the doorway. She called out my name, expecting me to emerge from the kitchen in an apron. When only silence answered, she assumed I was upstairs and immediately began directing my father to set up the coat rack. They did not even approach the dining table. They never looked closely enough to notice my missing chair or the envelope resting in the shadows. 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. 20 relatives poured into the house. Wet shoes squeaked against the hardwood floor. Laughter drifted through the hallway. Bright, cheerful giggles from my aunts and cousins reacting to the sheer visual impact of the pristine dining room. Beside my father, Chloe spun in a slow circle, letting out a high-pitched squeal of joy that spiked the audio levels on my phone. My parents soaked up the compliments, playing the role of generous hosts to perfection. The cheerful atmosphere shattered a few minutes later. A new set of heavy, purposeful footsteps echoed on the porch. The catering manager stepped into the house, but his staff remained outside by the trucks. He held a thick clipboard. The rain lashed against the open door behind him. He walked straight toward my mother. He pulled a printed email thread from his clipboard. It was the payment link he had sent her 48 hours ago, the one she had deliberately ignored, assuming my card would eventually be charged. He stated clearly that his crew would not bring a single tray of food inside until the $15,000 balance was settled. He tapped a pen against the outstanding total. The sharp clicking noise cut through the ambient chatter of the relatives. I watched my mother react. Her lips moved rapidly. A nervous, hollow laugh bubbled up from her throat and transmitted through my speaker. She tossed her head back and smiled, gesturing toward the kitchen and the hallway. She was looking for me. She expected her reliable distribution center to materialize from the shadows and slide a piece of plastic across the mahogany table. The caterer did not mirror her smile. He stood firm. He shook his head slowly, the stiff fabric of his uniform rustling with the movement. My mother waved her hands. Her breathing quickened, short, shallow gasps replacing her confident laughter. The tension in the room thickened into a visible weight. The relatives stopped chattering. The sudden silence on the audio feed felt heavier than the thunder outside. Richard turned away from the caterer. His eyes scanned the length of the dining table. He noticed the missing chair first. Then his gaze locked onto the cream-colored envelope resting precisely in the center of the polished wood. He took 3 slow steps forward, the soles of his leather shoes dragging slightly against the floorboards. He reached out and picked up the paper. The sharp tearing sound of the envelope ripping open echoed loudly in the silent room. He pulled out the invoice and the handwritten note. I watched his posture crumble. The straight, rigid spine bowed under an invisible pressure. He read the single sentence. His chest heaved. A ragged, terrified gasp escaped his lungs. He dropped the paper onto the table. He turned his head and looked directly into the camera lens again. His eyes were wide, the color draining from his face. Panic set in. Not a theatrical performance, but a grounded physical reaction to a broken supply chain. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning, stark white under the chandelier lighting. My mother rushed to his side. She snatched the paper from the wood. Her eyes darted across the ink. She did not scream. She clamped her hand over her mouth. A muffled, terrified whimper leaked through her fingers. She immediately spun around to face her siblings. Her hands moved in frantic circles. She pointed toward the front door, and then toward the ceiling. She was spinning a narrative. Her mouth formed words about a sudden crisis, a work emergency pulling me away at the last minute. The forced, unnatural rhythm of her nervous giggling filled the room again. A desperate attempt to paint over the collapsing structure of her evening. The caterer remained unyielding. He crossed his arms over his chest, the heavy clipboard resting against his side. He tapped his foot, a steady, impatient rhythm. He refused to signal his staff to unload the food warmers. The standoff stretched into agonizing minutes. My sister began to pace, her boots stomping hard against the floor. She pointed toward the stairs. She started moving from the bottom floor to the top floor, walking up the stairs to search my bedrooms. The heavy thud of her footsteps ascending the wooden staircase reverberated through the microphones. She was looking for a solution that was already sitting 3 miles away in a dark sedan. Then the mechanical vibration started. The phone in my hand buzzed violently. The screen flashed with an incoming call from Chloe. I watched her on the security feed, holding her device to her ear. Her face contorted in confusion. I let it ring. The vibration sent a numb, tingling sensation through my fingers. The call went to voicemail. 10 seconds later, the phone buzzed again. My mother this time. I watched her pacing near the window, her chest heaving with deep, angry breaths. She jammed her thumb against her screen over and over. I let it ring. The storm outside intensified. Lightning flashed, illuminating the coffee shop parking lot in a brief, blinding strobe. Thunder cracked a second later, a massive booming sound that rattled my teeth. Inside the car, the phone continued its relentless mechanical dance. Buzz after buzz after buzz. The notifications stacked up on the screen in a descending list of desperation. My father called next. His face on the security camera looked hollow. He held his phone with trembling hands. His breathing sounded shallow and rapid. He pressed the device to his face. I stared at the incoming caller identification and did nothing. For 45 agonizing minutes I sat in the cold car. The heater blasted warm air across my shins, but a deep chill remained settled in my chest. The phone recorded 68 missed calls in that short window. A rapid, frantic numerical representation the family realizing their safety net had vanished. I watched the catering manager finally shake his head and walk out the front door, his patience fully exhausted. The heavy oak slammed shut behind him. The catering trucks pulled out of my driveway, their headlights sweeping across the wet grass. The illusion shattered instantly. Inside the house, the relatives did not linger to offer sympathy. They immediately began to gather their coats. The joyful chatter from earlier was gone, replaced by the hurried, heavy shuffling of embarrassed guests fleeing a humiliating disaster. My phone screen lit up one final time with a text message. A notification from my uncle. I opened the application. The text contained no questions, only a sharp judgment. The message outlined the cruelty of humiliating my parents over financial matters in front of the entire extended family. He called my absence a calculated betrayal. Reading the words felt like swallowing cold water. Standing up for myself required alienating the moderate members of my family. The relatives who preferred the quiet, compliant version of me. The version that absorbed the cost, so they never had to witness the ugly mechanics of our family dynamic. The isolation stung. A sharp physical ache behind my ribs. I turned off the security feed. The screen went black. The only sounds left were the steady drumming of the rain on the roof and the quiet, measured rhythm of my own breathing. I placed the phone in the cup holder. I gripped the steering wheel and stared into the dark storm. I had severed the line. The supply chain was broken. I just had to survive the silence that followed. The morning sun struggled to penetrate the thick layer of gray clouds hanging over San Antonio. Wind whipped against the reinforced glass of my office window. The low-frequency hum of the commercial ventilation system provided a steady drone in the quiet workspace. I sat behind a large glass desk, focusing my attention on the logistical software, mapping out cargo routes across the southern sector. The digital interface cast a pale, white glow across the room. Rainwater from the previous night's storm dripped steadily from the metal gutters outside, hitting the concrete pavement below with a rhythmic splashing sound. A soft chime from the security monitor resting on the corner of my desk drew my focus away from the supply chain data. The live video feed captured the ground-level entrance of the commercial building. Richard Greta walked through the sliding glass doors. He bypassed the elevator bank and approached the concrete stairwell. He moved from the bottom floor upwards to the second floor. The heavy thud of his leather shoes, echoing against the cinderblock walls, transmitted clearly through the audio feed. His pace lacked its usual brisk, confident rhythm. He dragged his feet, pulling his weight up each step with visible effort. He reached the landing outside my office. He paused in the hallway. He was standing upright, facing the camera, looking directly forward. The high-definition lens revealed a man stripped of his defensive armor. His skin possessed a pale ashen hue. Deep dark circles bruised the fragile skin beneath his eyes. His shoulders sagged heavily, pulling the fabric of his expensive suit jacket into unnatural wrinkled folds. A sharp, wheezing intake of breath vibrated through the small speaker on my desk. The heavy solid core door of my office clicked open. The hinges groaned a low metallic protest. He stepped onto the carpeted floor. The physical toll of the chaotic anniversary banquet manifested in his unsteady, uneven gait. He stopped at the edge of the smooth glass surface separating us. A ragged, heavy sigh escaped his lungs. The sound carried the weight of a collapsing structure. He reached into his worn leather briefcase. His hands trembled violently, causing the brass clasps to rattle against each other in a frantic metallic chatter. He extracted a thick manila folder and dropped it onto the glass. The heavy thud of the paper breaking the quiet atmosphere of the room. He sank into the guest chair opposite my desk. The leather cushion hissed as it absorbed his weight. He covered his face with both hands and let out a low, muffled sob. The sound of a man facing the end of his fabricated reality. I reached across the desk and pulled the folder toward me. The rough texture of the manila paper scraped against the glass. I opened the cover. The documents inside provided the confession he lacked the capacity to vocalize. The paperwork did not detail a slow fiscal year or a temporary cash flow shortage. The top page displayed a finalized banking agreement for a secondary mortgage on their primary residence. The dark blue ink on the signature line belonged to both him and my mother. The terms of the loan outlined a predatory interest rate and a reckless leverage of their remaining equity. I turned the page. The rustle of the thick paper sounded deafening in the confined space. Bank statements from the past 18 months highlighted a series of massive capital transfers. The receiving account belonged to a limited liability company registered under my sister. The business name listed Chloe and her failing art gallery. The numbers painted a devastating picture of financial ruin. They had liquidated their entire retirement security to fund a vanity project producing zero revenue. The subsequent pages contained printed emails, correspondence between my parents calculating my annual salary and projecting my future corporate earnings. I scanned the top email sent from my mother to my father. If Luna gets that senior director promotion in the third quarter, we can leverage her new income bracket to cover the second mortgage. Make sure she pays for the anniversary dinner first, so we know she is fully committed to helping the family. The printed words hit my chest like a physical blow. Barbara had formulated a plan, relying entirely on my stability to float their mounting debts indefinitely. They engineered the anniversary banquet as a test run for total financial dependence. The panic captured on the security feed the night before stemmed directly from the sudden collapse of this carefully constructed safety net. The unpaid catering invoice represented the first domino in a chain reaction of bankruptcy. A heavy wave of grief settled behind my ribs. The physical sensation possessed no traces of triumph or vindication. Uncovering the truth offered no satisfaction. The data confirmed a cold reality I had spent 3 decades trying to ignore. My professional success had never earned their respect or their love. My achievements only upgraded my status to a vital utility. I functioned merely as a reliable distribution center for their endless deficits, a machine designed to output capital and absorb blame. The realization burned with a dull, persistent ache in my throat. I closed the folder. The cardboard cover smacked against the glass desk with a sharp, definitive snap. Richard watched my hands. His breathing grew shallow and rapid. He dropped his hands from his face and pressed his palms together. A silent, desperate plea. His red-rimmed eyes communicated a frantic request for a financial bailout. He waited for a check to erase the consequences of their choices. He expected the reliable daughter to fix the broken system. I opened the top drawer of my desk. The metal tracks glided silently. I reached past my leather checkbook. My fingers bypassed the company stationery. I located a small stack of thick matte cardstock. I withdrew a single business card. The embossed lettering advertised the services of a highly rated bankruptcy attorney, specializing in asset liquidation and foreclosure defense. I placed the card onto the smooth glass. I slid the small rectangle across the desk. It stopped inches from his trembling fingers. I tapped the printed phone number twice. A firm, definitive motion. I pushed the checkbook deeper into the drawer and slid the metal track shut with a sharp click. The physical refusal hung in the air. A tangible barrier erected between my resources and their ruin. Richard stared at the small piece of cardstock. A long, shuddering breath exited his nose. The sound carried the weight of total, undeniable defeat. His shoulders collapsed further. The last remnants of his pride evaporating into the sterile office air. He reached out and picked up the card. The paper slipped between his shaking fingers before he secured it in his palm. He pushed himself out of the chair, the leather cushion expanding with a soft hiss. He turned around. He dragged his feet across the carpeted floor. The heavy door swung open and clicked shut behind him. I listened to his slow descent down the stairwell, the rhythmic thud of his footsteps fading into the distance until only the sound of the wind remained. My mobile device illuminated on the corner of the desk. A silent notification indicating a new message in the extended family group chat. The screen populated with blocks of text from aunts and cousins. The digital icons signaled a tidal wave of judgment. Standing firm carried a severe cost. The severed financial line meant my parents faced legitimate imminent ruin. The extended relatives, who preferred the comfortable illusion of our family dynamic, now viewed me as a traitor. They resented the disruption of their peace. The isolation wrapped around me like a heavy winter coat. The price of truth meant walking alone. I picked up my coffee mug. The ceramic felt warm against my palm. I turned my attention back to the dual monitors. The logistics software blinked with new data points. Cargo ships navigating deep ocean waters. Supply trucks crossing state lines. Systems operating within healthy, sustainable parameters. A strange cold peace filled the quiet office. The heavy chain of obligation lay broken on the floor. The dining room table back at my house remained empty. The crystal glasses catching the morning light in an unoccupied room. I adjusted my posture in the ergonomic chair. I clicked the mouse and opened a new spreadsheet. The columns stretched out clean and empty. A blank ledger waiting for a fresh start. I finally understood the reality of my existence. I never needed a seat at their table. I had already built my own,